All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church, building community, inspiring growth, creating change. Here in the heart of Kansas City, we come together to create this hour of shared reflection so that we might be renewed in courage for these times and inspired to lives of greater dignity, higher purpose, deeper generosity, and more effective action. If you are new to Unitarian Universalism or to our congregation, we want to get to know you and share a part of your journey. If this place is already your spiritual home, welcome back. We need one another, and it is good to be together again. We are so excited to be together in person again after almost 2 years of gathering only online during the coronavirus pandemic. Nevertheless, through the gifts of technology, we continue to celebrate community and connections with each other online also, as we lean into the values of justice, compassion, and reason. Together, we learn the love that has the power to overcome both loneliness in the heart and oppression in the world. Welcome to our service this morning. May the words and music and images that we offer today nourish our best selves, calling forth abundant wisdom and love.
Arise, O souls, all arise.
Good morning, and welcome to this gathering in the House of Remembrance, both physical and virtual, of this covenant community of memory and promise. Sometimes, when there are no words to mend our hearts, when they are broken again and again in the horrors of the age, as our hearts are broken again today for the 19 children killed this week, along with the 2 who sought to shield them, as they were broken again last week by the murders of 10 of our Black fellow citizens at a grocery store in Buffalo. Then it is that the ancient prophecies, perhaps, speak to us best. The messenger of the Hebrew God proclaimed to the people of his nation 8 centuries before Jesus of Nazareth was born, that one day they should beat their swords of war into plowshares and their deadly spears into garden implements, and humanity would learn to live in peace without weapons or violence. What the prophet did not say was that God would bring this about by divine intervention in response to the people's thoughts and prayers. Rather, he said it would come to pass because God would judge the nations and arbitrate among the people the wisdom of their ways. Surely by now it must be obvious that the ways of our nation in this matter are not the ways of wisdom. We have ceased to heed the founding admonition, choose life, that you and your children may live. Instead, we have chosen fear and greed and destruction, and as a consequence, we and our children die. We bring our broken hearts here into the presence of the holy, seeking comfort and the redemption of our despair. But if our hands are empty of action and our hearts are empty of the will to change, we will find ourselves turned empty away, unsolaced, with hands still unclean, to await the next inevitable disaster. 8 decades ago, in the early years of the 20th century civil rights movement, the minister of the Washington, D.C. Unitarian Church, another All Souls, prayed on behalf of his congregation, "O God, from whom we seek concealment of our treason and shelter for our lies, teach us that conscience gives no quarter, and why it cannot, that the truth we banish leaves us empty of all meaning, and that the good we would not love returns to break our hearts." It is not just the good we would not love, the lives of our children, that returns to break our hearts. It is also the evil we would not name. Today I proclaim, standing in the footsteps of the prophet Isaiah and of my elder colleague A. Powell Davies, this word of divine truth. The weapons of mass human execution are unholy. That instrument whose only purpose is to rapidly and indiscriminately kill people is damnable and accursed. It has no rights. To love such a thing is idolatry. To take joy in it is evil. To defend its use is wicked. Until people of faith and goodwill can unite in such a pronouncement, our society will stand condemned among the nations, and a voice will be heard in the land every day that is Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more. Today, on this Memorial Day holiday, here in this covenant community, we remember beloved members of this congregation whose lives have ended during the time of the COVID pandemic, when it was not possible to celebrate their memories as has been our custom in a public gathering. While a few of them departed from us earlier than we would have wished in the course of diseases that our science has not yet conquered, most were full of years and well prepared for the end when it came. Our grief for their loss is an integral part of our humanity, in which we learn to possess our sorrows as the measure of our loves, to know gratitude for our companions on our journey, and to embrace mortality as the destiny we all share. To honor such bereavements with reverent sorrow is part of our nature, as creatures conscious of our own finitude, who cherish one another's affection. We would be something other than human if the death of our loved ones did not break our hearts. Such remembering and such mourning are holy moments that strengthen our bonds to one another and expand the community of the living to include the presence of those gone before. From this practice, we grow together in wholeness. The need to bewail and bury our murdered children and our murdered neighbors is not natural or life-giving in the same way. Rather than reverent sorrow and gratitude, it gives rise to anguish, rage, and despair. It flushes our bodies with the chemicals of trauma response, which require action in order to be metabolized without doing us harm. The actions available to us, voting, donating, writing to legislators, attending rallies, are abstract and strategic. They bear fruit only in the long run and do not appease our urgent impulse and pain. I invite us for this hour to breathe as deeply as you can. Unclench your jaw, your shoulders. If tears come, bid them welcome. Let the horizon of your mind expand beyond this particular week, these specific events. If you want to, lay your hand on your heart and feel it still beating, maintaining life, sensation, response within you. We will need the energy of life, the sensation of outrage, the response of accountability in the days to come. You will be needed, body, heart, and spirit. For today, this morning, let us return to the tender duty we had promised ourselves of paying tribute to our lost elders from the past 2 years. Let us remind ourselves that this is how life should end, in righteous and beloved community, with tears of thankful memory and names that will be a blessing for generations to come. In their honor, we kindle this chalice flame, here and in all the places from which we gather, to affirm that they in their passing are not forgotten, to affirm that we in our mourning are not alone. I invite you now to rise and join in the song Spirit of Life, either by singing or signing or both, and then remain standing for our words of covenant. And if you want to be able to move easily, step out into the aisle. Give yourselves some room. As a community, we affirm, hang on. There we are. Goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. You may be seated, and those of the children who are departing to their classes may go with song. On March 12, 2020, Bob Wilson, longtime friend of All Souls and part of the Aging Bulls group, died. 3 days later, our building was closed and public gatherings suspended in response to the increasing risks of COVID-19. After that time, it became impossible to offer the celebration of life and memorial services that have long been customary among our members of our congregation. Over the 2 years that have ensued, 18 more of our members and friends who might normally have been remembered in this way have died. Thankfully, none of them of COVID. One of the many cruel aspects of the pandemic has been the impossibility of mourning these losses in our traditional way. We have employed many alternatives: online memorial services, outdoor gatherings, ceremonies with limited attendance at funeral homes and other venues. The results were often lovely in their own ways, but they did not have the community accessibility that our events here at church do. As the coronavirus precautions have begun to be lifted, it seemed to me important to have an opportunity to commemorate these dear ones together, and Memorial Day seems like a fitting time. I want to thank Floy Williams in particular, both for her help in bringing this service about and for her gift of our lovely flowers this morning. Also, without the help of Angie Jennings, we would not have the beautiful slides that will be on the screen shortly. It truly takes a village, not only to raise a child, but to properly honor a long and meaningful life at its end. If you would like to know more about any of the friends remembered today, you can find additional details or leave a memory of them that you would like to share at their In Memoriam page on the All Souls website. We begin with Bob Wilson, who died just days before we pivoted to all virtual congregational activities in March of 2020. 2 readings that Bob lived by were these, from Andrea Marois. Here we are on this earth with only a few decades to live, and we lose many irreplaceable hours brooding over grievances that in a year's time will be forgotten. Instead, let us devote our life to worthwhile actions and feelings, to great thoughts, real affections, and enduring undertakings, for life is too short to be little. And from John Burroughs, I still find each day too short for all the thoughts I want to think, all the walks I want to take, all the books I want to read, and all the friends I want to see. Char Reynolds was the loving mother of Sharon Zhang Reynolds and Zia Khanum Reynolds, our friends, as well as beloved dog mom to numerous canine companions. She was a dear friend to so many people around the world and made it her mission to express her love for people through the things she made and did for them. Through her endless generosity to all her friends, she was a living lesson about friendship and loyalty. She also loved the work of the Unitarian poet E.E. Cummings, including this one quoted by her daughter Zarin. "If there are any heavens, my mother will all by herself have one. It will not be a pansy heaven or a fragile heaven of lilies of the valley, but it will be a heaven of black-red roses. My father will be deep like a rose, tall like a rose, standing nearby, swaying over her silent, with eyes which are really petals and see nothing, with the face of a poet, really which is a flower and not a face, with hands that whisper, 'This is my beloved, my.' Suddenly, in sunlight, he will bow, and the whole garden will bow." Courtney Perkins was born and lived most of his life in Kansas City, where he practiced law for over 45 years. He served in the U.S. Army and was stationed in Trieste. After his discharge, he completed his BA in history at KU, and he went on with the help of the GI Bill to Columbia Law School in New York, where he earned his JD in 1951. Courtney was an avid reader and a great conversationalist, always informed on current events. He enjoyed a discussion and welcomed opposing viewpoints. He loved to travel. He was a good dancer and a fine horseman. A longtime member of All Souls Unitarian Universalist Church, Courtney was active in the Aging Bulls men's group.
This thing off. Joe's daughter, Laurel, was expected to be here today to read a tribute to Joe that she had written. But her partner came down with COVID, and Laura is in, Quarantine, thank you. So I'm going to be reading the tribute that she sent. My dad, Joe Williams, passed away in the spring of 2020. I wasn't able to be with him at the end due to the COVID lockdown. His death in that isolation still feels like a wound that won't heal. Now I am again not present at this gathering to remember those who have passed. Thank you for including my remembrance today. And thank you for supporting Dad's wife, Floy. She and my dad loved each other well and long. I loved them together. Dad and my mom, Bonnie, had 3 daughters, Amy the eldest, me in the middle, and lastly, Susan. He was a good dad. His innate curiosity about history, science, literature, philosophy, and anything and everything animated my childhood. He always wanted to learn, impart facts, and tell stories related to whatever I was learning in school. I grew up watching him learn how to do things he wanted to do, fix things that needed fixing. He seemed very brave to me. He also had a love for the simple and silly pleasures of life. He loved good food. He taught all the family ceremony and rituals required to make in making and eating ice cream, homemade ice cream. We shared many wonderful meals also. In those years, Dad and Floy lived aboard their boat, Elizabeth. Great food, great company, full hearts. I have a lifetime of memories of my dad. Most of all, I know he loved and believed in me. He did the best he could, and that was pretty darn good. I miss him, and I glimpse him when I look in the mirror. I hope he knows that I like it. I wish that I had time to add my own memories to Laura's, but I will only talk about his great love of sailing. Joe loved, let's see where I am. Where am I now? Joe loved sailing and sailboats and the sea and spent many years planning and learning about making it his life. I am going to read a bit from Tennyson, who wrote a poem about Odysseus, who also longed to go sailing. And maybe it'll help to understand a little bit more Joe's passion for sailing. Tennyson has Odysseus saying, "The lights begin to twinkle from the rocks. The long day wanes, the slow moon climbs the deep, moans round with many voices. Come, my friends, 'tis not too late to seek a newer world. Push off, and sitting well in order, smite the sounding furrows. For my purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset and the baths of all the western stars until I die." I think Joe would have liked his life to end like that. But he did have 20 wonderful years where he sailed beyond the sunset, and maybe the baths, whatever that is, of all the western stars. And I got to go along. Thank you.
Thank you, Floyd. During his lifelong fight for social justice, John Gingrich never became a cynic. He was, at heart, an optimist who understood that progress was not an end point, but a path to walk each and every day. And no matter what challenges he faced, he retained his sense of humor about life to the very end. During his career as a Methodist minister, John served congregations and communities in Oklahoma, Colorado, Iowa, Ohio, Kansas, and Tokyo, Japan. John once said, "I continue to affirm that when and if we acted on the basis of the golden rule or some similar insight, this would be a more livable, if not perfect, world." Michael Nelson says, "I knew John and Roberta as elders at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Kansas City. Humble, gracious, and kind. They lived, taught, and led peacefully. I feel blessed to have been in their presence."
Stand at my grave and weep. I am not there, I do not sleep. I am 1,000 wings that blow. I am the diamond
her good friend Thea Nedfield says this of Linda Jones. Linda loved life, her daughters, her partners, her brother and sister-in-law, and her wider family. She loved her friends, her patients, her church community. Linda loved her profession and colleagues. She loved a good time and a glass of wine, a good laugh, and the music of Winfield. She loved road trips and travel to Mexico. Linda loved justice and compassion, especially around immigrants. She loved to heal and to help. Her home was bright, spacious, and welcoming. She served up generosity and sympathetic acceptance. Her family and friends wanted to talk with her, and she could stick with an intimate conversation for hours. She was often late. However, when she did arrive, her love brightened the room, and that's what mattered. Things will be dimmer and cooler with her gone, so it's up to each of us to turn up our own lights a little bit, like the love that warms the space between and among us. The blessing of having had time with Linda will support us in letting our little lights shine.
I met Mary Alice in 2017. It was right after the election, and I was looking for some place where I could safely discuss politics. I had heard about a group called Seniors for Justice, so I went. That day they were talking about demonstrating. I suggested healthcare as a topic most people could agree on. At that time, the Republicans were pushing to get rid of Obamacare with not that much on replacement. Since I seemed to have some knowledge of Obamacare and the rumored replacement, before I knew it, I was the speaker for next month's meeting. Mary Alice was the kind of person who could get you to do things. I joined another Mary Alice group, Liberal Religious Gathering. I later learned that Mary Alice saw a need for something for people who were not of fundamentalist or conservative leanings and started the group. It is a small group that discusses issues and ideas of all kinds. That's where I got to know her as a person. From those Fridays, I learned about her youth in Sugar Creek, Missouri. I knew she was divorced and a non-practicing Catholic. I knew she had taught at St. Luke's Nursing School. I had no idea that she had a PhD. I figured out that she was extremely knowledgeable about politics, smart as a whip, and passionate about the issues. Plus, she was a fun, caring, and wonderful person. From her obituary, she was born of parents of Croatian descent. She had 3 children, which she raised to be critical thinkers. She had a degree in chemistry and biology, a master's in education, and eventually a PhD. She taught at St. Luke's for 27 years and then was curriculum coordinator for the health profession program at Southeast Magnet School. She retired in 1996. While at John Knox, she served on their board of directors and the ethics committee. She started the 2 groups I've already mentioned and was, of course, still very active in all things political and democratic. She organized and did voter registration for new residents at John Knox, even knowing the majority of them were probably Republicans. Mary Alice was a political activist. She was very supportive of young women running for office. She was president of the Democratic Club. In 2001, George W. Bush came to the Truman High School to give a speech. As she was accompanying him into the building, she passed many of her activist friends who were picketing, and she waved at them. She said he was very friendly and that she liked him. Mary Alice was the kind of person that was comfortable with both presidents and protesters. I knew that she had some health issues and had been in the hospital a couple of times, but she never said much. After COVID, we were unable to meet in person, so I set up our Friday group on Zoom. She took to it right away as she was very tech savvy. We were surprised when we heard she was going into hospice. I later learned that she had renal failure and had decided to forego dialysis, knowing full well what the result of that decision would be. From hospice, she still joined our Zoom meetings and seemed just like herself. When hospice started allowing restricted visitation, Barbara and I went to see her. It was outside, through a gate with a plastic barrier. We had a good visit and told her that we would continue the group she had started. 2 days later, we learned she had passed. In death, as in life, she had followed her own path. I talked to the John Knox chaplain who knew her well for many years. He said that the Seniors for Justice name came from her broader understanding of the meaning of justice. To her, it meant caring about the powerless, speaking for the speechless, standing in their stead, and doing the right thing. Time-wise, I barely knew her, but I felt like I knew her. She was smart, compassionate, funny, and wise. She is missed.
This poem from the Buddhist poet-monk Thich Nhat Hanh touched Carolyn Connor deeply, and she kept a copy close to her as the end of her life came near. He writes, "The moment I die, I will try to come back to you as quickly as possible. I promise it will not take long. Isn't it true I am already with you as I die each moment? I come back to you in every moment. Just look, feel my presence. If you want to cry, please cry, and know that I will cry with you. The tears you shed will heal us both. Your tears are mine. The earth I tread this morning transcends human history. Spring and winter are both present in the same moment. The young leaf and the dead leaf are really one. My feet touch deathlessness, and my feet are yours. Walk with me now. Let us enter the dimension of oneness and see the cherry tree bloom in the midst of winter. Why should we talk about death? I don't need to die to be back with you."
I always looked forward to seeing Bill Schrimsher at church Sundays and serving on the Caring Connection with him, the perfect committee for Bill's kind thoughtfulness. His warmth and fellowship went out to all he knew, and he loved his extended family, especially his niece and her son. Bonnie Schwarzenholz, chair of the Caring Connection, shared a story with me. She wrote, "Bill and I had a private joke. When I asked a former grade school student of Bill's if she remembered Mr. Shrimpshire, she said, 'Is he still alive?' I assured her that we were the same age and very much alive. After that, Bill and I always greeted each other with, 'I'm still alive.' I like to think that Bill's humor and warmth is still alive and wafting around us. Bill's art students and fellow teachers knew how fortunate they were to have Bill as a mentor and colleague. Bill and my late husband Lowell shared their love of art together like two schoolboys. As a service moderator here at All Souls, Bill was welcoming to friends and visitors, and he helped other members new to service participation to feel confident. I know from reading the tributes on his shared memories page that many of you also felt the warm, rooted acceptance he held us in like a warm embrace. Bill made us all feel better by just being with him for a simple chat. He was and is a beloved and valued part of the All Souls family and is greatly missed.
For his 90th birthday, 6 years before he died, Manny Pedram received many lovely tributes in cards, and some of those were collected for his memorial. One person wrote, "Imagine a candle for every time you've made a difference in someone else's life. The light from all those candles would make the world so much warmer, brighter, and happier, just like you." Another said, "You have that wonderful quality that people call character. You know what you believe and what you stand for, and that's the way you live. Your example of integrity and commitment is the best legacy a family could ever have, and that's why you are loved and admired so much." Someone else said, "When you look back on your life, you must feel a lot of pride. You've lived a rich life filled with people who care about you. You are a great example of how to live fully, giving all you can, your kindness, your hugs, your happiness, and making others feel good just to be around you. So many hearts are full of love for you on this day and always." And one said, "That man is a success who has lived well, laughed often, and loved much," quoting Robert Louis Stevenson, "who looked for the best in others and gave the best he had."
Isaac Jonathan, known as Jack to all of us, was born in Cairo, Egypt, into a lively household where numerous languages were spoken: Spanish, Hebrew, and French at home, Arabic in the community. Italian was added when the boys went to an Italian elementary school, and that's where Jack went by the name of Giacomo. And in English was introduced when his sisters attended an English school. At 13, an accident confined Jack to bed for 6 months. His father brought him books on history and adventure, creating Jack's lifelong love of books and storytelling. In high school, Jack's relay team won the Royal Egyptian National Championship in 1938 and earned a trip to Italy to participate in an all-Italian meet on the track built for the ill-fated 1940 Olympics. When Jack's beloved father was killed in an accident, Jack dropped out of school and joined his older brother in earning money to support the family. He always regretted not going to university. He was hired to work for the largest printing supply company in the Middle East and quickly learned all there was to know about the industry. By 20, he was the exclusive company salesman for all of Egypt. He grew a mustache to look older. In 42, Jack was enlisted to help the U.S. Office of Strategic Services with printing propaganda material for the Allies to drop behind enemy lines. Post-war, Jack became chief of printing and publications for the USIS and the American Embassy in Cairo, translating and printing material to combat communism and to promote democracy in the Middle East. In 1950, he was sent to the US to learn about advances in printing, beginning his tour in Springfield, Massachusetts, where he met the love of his life, Rena della LaBarr. Soon after, they were married and moved to Cairo. Hoping to eventually support his family as a photographer, Jack traveled throughout Egypt, taking many photos of his native country and its people. He had a great eye and successful exhibits of his photos in Cairo and Alexandria. Unrest in Egypt forced Jack and Rena to emigrate to the US. With a baby on the way, Jack abandoned his hopes of becoming a professional photographer and sought steady employment, eventually moving to Kansas City, where he began a 30-year career at Hallmark Cards. There, he held a variety of jobs in creative design and pioneered the use of photographs in greeting cards. Jack and Rena settled into the Kansas City community where they raised their children, Stephen, David, and Carla. In '83, Jack and Rena moved to Europe when Jack went to work for Swarovski Crystals. Can't say that word well, sorry. But in '89, they returned to Kansas City, and Jack began working with Jim Stowers, a friend and the founder of 20th Century Investors, now American Century. Jack helped Stowers create a series of books written for the ordinary investor, including the award-winning Yes You Can, Raise Financially Aware Kids. Following Stowers' death, Jack opened his own business, Jonathan and Associates, and later Melagrana Editions, focusing on his photography and publishing, and that's where I worked for him. Jack had several photographic exhibits, including retrospective exhibits of his 1951 photographs at the Biblioteca Alexandrina in Alexandria, Egypt, and in Sarasota, Florida. He donated photographs for numerous charitable causes, including a permanent display at Children's Mercy Hospital. Jack worked his whole life to take care of his family until COVID lockdowns forced him to close his office. Although he thought he'd live forever, Jack died 6 months shy of his 100th birthday.
Remembering Bill Owens, Don Dickey wrote this in his In Memoriam page. Sandy and Bill were members of a church-sponsored discussion group, which is where I met them. We called ourselves Seekers. Sandy did much of the organizing until her health failed. Bill had difficulty hearing, which limited his participation. He did continue to write thoughtful articles which he would copy and pass out at our meetings. It was sad that such a brilliant mind was locked behind a wall of not hearing. Bill was always kind and gracious, and I am a better person for having known him. I invite you to join me in a response, or antiphonal, actually, reading, which we'll share from the right side and the left side, beginning with, and we go to the left. We'll begin on the left, which is over there. Okay, so please join me. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember them. In the blowing of the wind and the chill of winter, we remember them. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember them. As long as we live, they too shall live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. It not only takes a village community of memory and promise to honor our dead, it also takes the time and skill of those who are willing to look into the void of grief and guide us safely through the rituals of dignity and comfort. I have spoken of the work of our membership director, Angie Jennings, in creating our slides today. Now I would also like to introduce Haley Sylvester, wave at us, Haley, thank you, who is exploring working with us as a sound technician so that J.D. Mann has a chance to return to singing with the choir. Thank you, Haley. We are grateful to you. Welcome aboard. It also takes a village to replace a music director who's come down with COVID. So thank you to Daniel Doss and to our singers for picking up the ball, and to JD and all the sound tech people for filling in for all that Anthony would normally be doing. All the resources that this community brings to bear when death occurs are available in our moments of need because of the routine investments that we make in our staff, in our buildings, our communications networks, and our music and worship capacities. All these depend upon the financial support of our members through regular pledging and spontaneous contributions. We now invite your generous donation to the work of this congregation as our offering for this morning is given and gratefully received.
We cannot consecrate.
Will you join me in the dedication of our offering? We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change toward a just and compassionate society. Dick Dawson left a collection of his own poetry for us to remember him by, one of them entitled, "Remember Me." He writes, "What I remember is not the facts or skills on which I was tested and graded. Some of them I can recall, but I would probably have learned them somehow, anyhow, if I needed to know them. One can only learn to love by loving and being loved in return. And I have loved teachers, colleagues, campers, students. To be a real teacher is to be touched in the head and the heart. If you can't be weird, what's the point of being? Does it matter? When I am gone and my students today are old, I want some of them to remember me fondly and laugh, maybe even read some of my poems and cry a little. But most of all, if they can pass on to their children and their friends and their students something of what I received, so that their nameless mentors from ages past to ages yet to come echo the eternal song of the progress of the human search. Ray Bragg said, 'We may not mean much to the universe, but we mean everything to one another. Blessed be.'"
Rena Jonathan died at the age of 99, 3 months after the death of her beloved husband, Jack. Rena was born in Springfield, Massachusetts in 1921. When she was 2 years old, her father, a firefighter, tragically died on the job, and her mother moved her back to Italy. Rena became fluent in Italian and French while living there. Returning to Massachusetts in 28, her mother married a Springfield fruit and produce merchant, and soon after, Rena's beloved brother Carlo was born. After high school, Rena went to Barnard College in New York City on a scholarship. Following graduation, she moved to Washington, D.C., where she worked for several U.S. government agencies devoted to the war effort. After the war, Rena's language skills resulted in her being assigned to the U.S. team involved with the setting up of a specialized agency in the newly created United Nations. The Food and Agricultural Organization was tasked with defeating hunger and creating food security for all. She frequently traveled between the US and Europe during the years 1945 to 50 as FAO took shape. In 1950, Rena returned to Springfield to tend to her ill mother, who died soon after. One evening, she attended a presentation at Springfield International College. Arriving late, Rena took the only empty seat, which happened to be in the front row. When the guest speaker finished and stepped off the stage, she realized she was sitting in his reserved seat. Thus she met the love of her life, Jack Jonathan. They were married not long after and moved to his home in Egypt. But the couple were forced to leave the country in 1952 after Nasser overthrew the monarchy. Rena, pregnant with their firstborn, returned to Springfield while Jack went to work in Cleveland, Ohio. Rena and baby Steve joined him in 53, and then in 54, they all moved to Kansas City, Missouri, which became their permanent base and where she raised their 3 children, Stephen, David, and Carla. Rena eventually went to work for the Johnson County Library System. In 83, Rena and Jack moved to Europe for several years, dividing their time between Austria and Monaco before returning to Kansas City. Her strong belief in maintaining ties to her friends and family across the US and Italy led her to undertake numerous trips, often with her 3 small children in tow. Cape Cod was a favorite summertime destination. In the last few years of her life, regular phone calls to family on the East Coast in Italy, as well as daily phone check-ins with local friends, became her habit. Rena and Jack joined All Souls and were active here, where they formed many decades-long friendships. And she joined numerous cultural organizations in Kansas City, including the Alliance Française and Friends of Chamber Music. She developed a strong network of friends that traveled widely in the US and Europe, including a memorable trip to Bulgaria with the International Folk Dancing Group led by Louise Baggett. I had the pleasure of being able to visit Rena weekly, at least weekly, for the last several years of her life, and it was such a delight to talk with her. Rena loved to dance, and when it came to her life, hers was a beautiful dance.
Gratitude, says John Henry Jowett, is a vaccine, an antitoxin, and an antiseptic. Dorothy Culp, with her nursing background and her commitment to a life of gratitude, would have agreed. Everyone who is fortunate enough to have known her misses Dorothy's gracious, generous spirit and her quick intellect, as well as her insistence on confronting anything she considered unfair. Her intentional and well-ordered life served and inspired many of us, and her loving presence made the world a lovelier place. Her one prescription for all of us was the one she followed herself, and that was persistent gratitude for every blessing and gift of life. According to that advice, let us be grateful for Dorothy, for her work, for her thought, for her friendship. And if we could be as thankful for our lives as she was for hers, she would surely be pleased with that legacy. She invited us to read this poem from Gabriel Horn as part of her memorial. He writes, "Let us become aware of the beauty of our lives, of the gifts we have been given. If we reflect on our struggles and how they enabled us to grow, If we close our eyes and see the blessings of this world and this life, if we feel a sense of gratitude, we become aware of the beauty. Amen.
Linda Parkinson lived a life of joyful service and created inviting space for others to join her. Her service to the All Souls community included work on the Board of Trustees, the Ministerial Search Committee that ultimately hired Jim Eller, and hosting new member events at her home. She and her husband, Robin, started the wonderful tradition of soup and salad prior to the Christmas Eve service each year. Community service related to All Souls also included volunteering at both the Gordon Parks Elementary School, that for a time was housed in this building, and at the Carver Schools. She also developed a project to build schools in Guatemala and moderated Sunday services. At Immaculate Conception Church, she served the houseless through the Morning Glory Cafe, Sunday meals, and clothing donation coordination. She loved and was loved by her communities, her church friends, her houseless friends, her numerous acquaintances, and family. She was fiercely loyal and a cheerful presence in the lives of all those she touched. She's mourned by all, but especially Robin, her daughter Katie, her son-in-law, and granddaughter.
Always an active volunteer, Joan Awald worked at local elections, provided transportation to area medical facilities, and helped at her daughter Elizabeth's school events. Travel was one of her passions, so she planned several trips to Jeep Jamboree events around the country, putting her treasured collection of maps to good use. She took great pride in her brief notoriety when she fended off an armed robber at a Brookside ATM by yelling obscenities and lying about her account balance, earning her the nickname Badass Moron among her family and friends. In retirement, she and her husband John delivered Meals on Wheels, and in 2020, she was given the Outstanding Service Award for her volunteer work here at All Souls. One of her friends here reports that Joan's smile is frozen in my mind. I'm sure she must have frowned once, but I never saw it. Such a positive person. She'll be missed.
First, I would like to say how much the family and I appreciated that so many of you came out to honor Ralph at the remembrance party that we had for him at Simpson House. Those who knew Ralph knew what a kind and generous person he was. He gave to so many charities, both for people and for animals. No matter where we went in the world, he found a dog or a cat to pet. And throughout our marriage, we had a long succession of cats and dogs. Ralph was known among his friends as a confirmed bachelor. So when we started dating, those friends said to me, go out, have a good time, enjoy yourself, but don't ever expect anything because that man is never getting married. Well, I guess I took that as a challenge. He not only took on a wife, but a 5-year-old daughter whom he loved dearly, and a dog, a ready-made family. I valued so many things about Ralph, but mostly his sense of humor. He kept me laughing through 52 years. I wanted to give you just a few examples of some of the things he said. One time we were talking about how our parents communicated with each other, and he made the observation that his mother was deaf and his father mumbled. So much for communication. A few years ago, we were enjoying our timeshare in Mexico, and we saw a man being pushed around in a wheelchair. And Ralph said, "That's me trying to use up my timeshare." Unfortunately, he didn't get to. We still have about 3 years left there. And I've been back a couple of times, but it's just not the same without him. This incident goes back to when we moved to northern Missouri a number of years ago because Ralph wanted to pursue his dream of being a farmer. And we didn't know the area very well, so we wanted to go out for a special meal. And we asked friends about a recommendation, and they told us about this restaurant in Centerville, Iowa, which was about 20 miles north of us. And so we went there, and on the table was a basket full of slices of white sandwich-type bread, each one in its own cellophane wrapper. And when the waitress came to take our order, Ralph picked up one of those slices and asked, "Is this homemade?" Fine dining it wasn't. Friends have thought that our marriage probably wouldn't last because we came from such different backgrounds. But we had the same views about politics and religion. We loved doing the same things, traveling to other countries, meeting new people, eating out in good restaurants, and and entertaining our friends wherever we lived, which was first St. Louis, then Dallas, then northern Missouri, and finally Kansas City. We had 52 wonderful years, and I miss him every day.
Our most recent loss was Sharon Zhang, who had a talent for caring. She loved children, art, animals, science, flowers, and Walt Disney. She was a dedicated nurse, teacher, and administrator, and she had a passion for social justice. She was a native Kansas Citian and lived here almost all her life. She made the world better for those around her with her compassionate attention, both finding and giving joy. Sharon had a tremendous loyalty to the people, the institutions, and the causes that she believed in. She and Fred were faithful supporters of All Souls and particularly enjoyed getting to know other members at the Dinners for Eight. She was an advocate for social justice, particularly for the elderly and those dealing with physical or mental ability challenges, and, of course, animals. She also generously supported the All Souls Hunger Outreach team. Sharon had a naturalist outlook on death, believing that we come from the same dust that makes the stars, and that our lives return to that cosmic energy when they are done. Did someone say there would be an end? An end. Oh, an end to love and mourning? Such voices speak when sleep and waking blend. The cold, bleak voices of the early morning when all the birds are dumb in dark November. Remember and forget, forget, remember. After the false night, warm, true voices wake. Voices of the dead that touches the cold living. Through the pale sunlight, once more gravely speak, tell me again, while the last leaves are falling. Dear child, what has once been so interwoven cannot be raveled, nor the gift ungiven. Now the dead move through all of us still glowing, mother and child, lover and lover mated, are wound and bound together and inflowing. What has been plated cannot be unplated. Only the strands grow richer with each loss, and memory makes kings and queens of us. Dark into light, light into darkness spin. When all the birds have flown to some real haven, we who find shelter in the warmth within listen and feel new cherished, new forgiven, as the lost human voices speak through us and blend our complex love, our mourning without end. Let's stand and sing together. We release this chalice flame, sending the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment out into the world. And these we also carry in our minds and hearts until we are together again. Remember, it is in our actions and not our words that our faith must be read. Go therefore in peace, and yes, in joy. Live in love. Die in love. It's that simple and that difficult, always.